A typical beer consists of water, a base malt, specialty malts, hops and yeast. So what if we did away with the water and the base malt and replaced that with apple juice? In theory, the juice will provide the fermentable sugars needed for the yeast to produce alcohol, along with contributing to the flavour, and the presence of specialty malts and hops keep this in the category of beer and not cider, which is just fermented fruit juice. I'm calling it Caramel Apple Ale, and I'm going to brew it up and serve it to my ever-willing beer taster, Norm.
There's some excitement and some trepidation.
The question is, will it brew? I'm Martin Keane, and this is the Brülosophy Show. Now, the inspiration for this idea came from avid viewer Marshall Schott. Marshall says, I think it would be a cool idea to make caramel apple ale where you mash only with specialty malts and with store-bought apple juice in place of water. Well, Marshall, thank you for contacting the Brülosophy Show, and I agree, I think this would be really cool. Now, Marshall sent me a list of ingredients, and the first of those is cheap store-bought apple juice. So I took a trip to the Lidl grocery store and found the branded apple juice malts, but Marshall did say cheap, so I also found the store-bought version. And while I was there, a pan of chocolat or two may have made its way into the grocery cart as well. So I bought 3 gallons of this stuff. This is not going to win any awards for quality, it's made from concentrate. And the listed ingredients are water, apple juice concentrate, and ascorbic acid, which provides some vitamin C. Now this is effectively going to be my brewing water, and it's also kind of like my malt extract as well, because I'm just adding specialty malts on top of this. And when I add water into a brew, one of the first things I'll consider is the water profile. Not entirely sure what the water profile of this is, but the one thing I do want to check is the pH, because it's apple juice. It's probably going to be pretty acidic, and that is the case. The pH is around 3.1, and that is a very acidic pH that's really going to cause the enzymes in the mash to struggle, as well as the yeast at fermentation. And when we compare that to the brewing water that I use, my reverse osmosis water, that has a pH of around 6.6. So I need to bring the pH of this guy up a good amount. Unfortunately, I have some help here in the form of another Brülosophy experiment. This one looked at brewing a beer using Powerade Zero. That also had a very acidic starting point, and the solution to that was chalk. Let's see what I've got on my water salts here. Here we go, calcium carbonate, otherwise known as chalk. Now in the Brülosophy experiment, they added 2 teaspoons of chalk into each bottle. Let's try that with this. Give it a shake. Well, that has raised the pH quite a bit, 4.9. I think 1 more teaspoon. 5.4, good enough for me. The difference though in the colour of this, I don't know if it's because of the way I mixed it up or because I added the chalk, but this looks like the freshly squeezed stuff now. Okay, let's see if I've got enough chalk to do all these bottles. All right, to the brew kettle. I'm gonna give each one of these a shake before adding it in. Why did I elect for 6 of these bottles, by the way, which is 3 gallons? Well, that's because of the ergonomics of my brewing kettle. I need to keep my heating element submerged, and it's about 2 gallons of liquid is needed to keep that thing submerged. So I'm going to start with 3 gallons. I'm going to lose a little bit with the mash, lose a little bit more with the boil, but this should ensure that the heating element stays submerged. So this is like the least amount of beer I could make in this kettle. Now let's get it heated up to 152 Fahrenheit or 67 Celsius. Now I'm making beer, not cider, so there's going to be a mash, and I have about a pound of specialty malts in here that I've crushed up. I'll explain what those are in a moment, but let's get these into the now heated apple juice. Now, given the amount of liquid I have in here, this is a very, very thin mash. Feels very watery. But then it's not like I'm starting with water. There's already fermentable stuff in here in the apple juice. All right, 30-minute mash. And while that's mashing, let me tell you about those specialty malts. So my caramel apple ale already has the apple, but what about the caramel and some malt flavour to balance out the beer? Well, in my 3-gallon batch, I'm using 12 ounces of honey malt. To that, I have a couple of caramel malts going in. There's caramel 20 and caramel 60 at 3 ounces each. Overall, a rather modest amount of barley. With the mash complete, I was curious to see where my pre-boil gravity stood, with a pH within range of what I was looking for. So far, so good. Out with the grain basket and in with the hops. For hops, thinking around sort of 15 IBU, nothing too bitter for this. So I'm just going to use a tiny amount of Warrior hops. And I have, I think, 6 grams here, something like that. And this is going to go into the boil. The boil is short as well, just going to boil for 15 minutes, starting right now. Now for yeast, I am going with Marshall's recommendation, which was to use a lager yeast, just a clean lager yeast, and I'm using Harvest. This is L17 from Imperial Yeast, but to use it at ale temperatures. So I'm going to be fermenting this at 68 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius, and we'll see what we get. And what we got was a beer that fermented all the way down to 1.006 for a respectable ABV of 7.7%. So that answers the question of, will it brew? Why, yes. Yes, it will. So now we must ask, should it be brewed? And for that, we turn to Norm. So you don't know what you're letting yourself in for?
I have no idea. There's some excitement and some trepidation.
This is a beer.
It is, okay. That amps up the anxiety, because when you say it like that, it makes me think that it is a beer only in the narrowest of beer definitions. It has a very nice color.
Yeah, I mean, if you hold up to the light, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Possibly.
It's a nice amber color. So looking at this beer, if somebody poured me this and didn't give me any heads up or something like that, I think that's probably an amber lager.
There's a lot of foam there, but I would be curious what you get on the nose for this.
Okay, let's see. I can't place it. This, I'm sure this is not right, but I got maybe a little bit of a pumpkin.
Pumpkin? Yeah. I can totally see that.
Yeah, pumpkin or maybe yam.
I absolutely get pumpkin-y yam.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Strangely, because there's no pumpkin or yam in it.
Okay, all right. Because a beer this color could easily be a pumpkin beer or a yam beer.
Take a taste.
Okay.
See what you think.
All right.
And then I'll tell you what's in it.
Okay. I got a very distinct flavor, like an old-fashioned candy, like a butterscotch. Also, there's a tremendous amount of linger in the flavor. This sort of coats your tongue, and you taste this one well past swallowing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
The taste does linger.
I've tasted much worse beers, honestly.
So would you like to know what it is?
I would love for you to snatch back the curtain and reveal, what we're looking at.
So the sort of the name of the beer is Caramel Apple Ale. The water and the base malt were replaced in their entirety with apple juice.
And this still classifies as a beer.
Yes, it's still a beer. It's not a cider.
It's not a cider, because when you explain the recipe to me, I'm immediately thinking this is a cider. Are there any hops in this?
Yes, and there are hops in there as
well.
well.
There are. Okay, I figured there had to be.
Yep.
I realize now that the butterscotch that I'm tasting is actually the caramel.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm getting that. If you've ever gotten a candied apple at the fair, something like that, or at an amusement park or something along those lines, the best candied apples are Granny Smith candied apples, where you've got that tart green Granny Smith along with the sweet candy coating.
Yes.
This has none of that Granny Smith profile. If it did, I think this would be really tasty. I cannot wait for the next mad scientist experiment that you call me over here to try.